Julian heard the chime above the bookstore door before he saw her. Rain still clung to her hair like it belonged there. Her coat was soaked through, drops trailing down the leather as if the storm had followed her in. But it wasn't the rain that made him freeze, it was her voice, still alphabetizing by heartbreak. She asked softly. Julian's blood stopped moving. That voice, that impossible, infuriating, intoxicating voice. It slid down his spine like a secret, like it had never left, like it had always known where he was hiding. He looked up, heart suddenly thunderous in his chest. Sophia. She didn't smile. Her lips were parted, her eyes unreadable, her stance half defensive, like she didn't know whether to run or fall into his arms. And all he could think about was the last time she whispered his name. With nothing on but moonlight and a promise, they both broke. "How the hell did you find me?" he asked, the words barely making it past his lips. She stepped further into the shop. Books towered like monuments around her, but she walked through them like she belonged in every chapter of his life. "You left breadcrumbs," she said. "Every article you published, every quote you used, every piece of me buried in every damn sentence." He turned away, because her eyes still did that thing made him feel like every wall he built was paper thin. "I thought you were happy," he muttered. "You moved on, you." "I got married," she interrupted. "It didn't stick." Julian's hands curled around the edge of the counter. "And you?" she asked, voice quieter now, still trying to forget me. He looked at her, then really looked. Not at her wet coat or the strands of hair framing her face, but at the space she left in him, the silence she'd turned into song, the ache that refused to heal. "You think I forgot you?" he said, stepping toward her slowly. "Your voice is in my bones, Sophia. I hear it every time I try to sleep." The air changed. It thickened. Her breath hitched just once, and he heard it like a heartbeat. She moved first, not with hesitation, but with need. Her hand touched his chest, flat, against where his heart had never quite stopped aching. He didn't flinch, didn't stop her. He couldn't. "I didn't come here to ruin you again," she whispered. "But you did," he said, eyes on her lips. "The second you walked through that door, lightning cracked the sky outside, but they didn't move, and in the stillness, with 1,000 unspoken things trembling between them, Julian reached for her, slowly, as if touching her too fast would shatter the moment. His fingers brushed her cheek. She leaned into it. "I never stopped wanting you," she said, voice breaking. "I never stopped writing you," he replied. Their kiss wasn't soft. It was years of denial, bottled and broken. It was rain on fire, thunder and silence. She gripped his shoulders like she wanted to carve her name back into his skin. He kissed her like he was drowning and her mouth was the air. And for one stolen second, the years between them melted. The storm outside screamed louder, but the storm inside had already begun. Julian didn't remember moving. One moment he was kissing her against the shelves, the next they were upstairs, surrounded by the ghost of a life he'd tried to live without her. The apartment above the bookstore wasn't glamorous, worn floors, a half-broken lamp, a record player that only worked when it wanted to, but it held the silence he had learned to survive in. Now it held her. Sophia stood in the center of the room, dripping rainwater onto the old rug, her chest rising and falling too fast for calm. Her eyes swept the space over the books, the chair, the whiskey bottle on the windowsill before settling on him. And in that gaze was something dangerous, memory and desire. "You live like you're still running," she said, unfastening her coat. I was. The coat fell to the floor with a soft thud. Beneath it, she wore a dark dress, simple, soaked through, clinging to her body like it missed his hands. Julian's throat tightened. She had always been beautiful, but now there was something deeper in her, something bruised, but burning. Sophia stepped closer. Her fingers found the hem of his shirt, slow, searching, still stubborn. She murmured, "Still yours," he answered. She looked up sharply, as if the words had struck her somewhere too deep to hide. Her hands slid beneath his shirt and rested against his bare skin, warm, trembling. She didn't ask permission. Her fingers moved upward, remembering the way he felt, like a map she once knew by heart. "I dreamed of this," she whispered, voice catching as she pulled his shirt over his head. "Of your chest, your scent, your heat. But the dreams always ended before I got to touch you again." "You're not dreaming," he said, cupping her cheek. "You're remembering," she shivered. Not from the cold, from him. Julian bent to kiss her, slower this time, more dangerous. Their mouths met with that kind of quiet intensity that comes from holding back too long. His hands slid around her waist, gripping her like she might vanish again. She arched into him, soft moans swallowed by the hunger of their kiss. Her hands found his back, his jaw, his hips, like they were searching for proof he was real. She pressed her forehead to his. "You taste the same," she whispered, "but you feel heavier." "I carried you for years," he said. "Of course I'm heavier." That made her break into a sound between a laugh and a sob. He lifted her effortless, and she wrapped around him like instinct. The bed was old, creaking beneath their weight, but it held them like it knew this was inevitable. He laid her down with a reverence that shook her, eyes never leaving hers. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, but his hands slid beneath it, slow and deliberate. "I want to remember everything," he said. "The way you breathe, the way your body sighs when I touch you here." Her breath hitched as his hand found the back of her thigh, and here. Her moan was quiet, sacred. She tilted her head back, eyes closed, as if offering herself to memory. His fingers moved with reverence, his mouth following like worship. Sophia pulled him closer, her hands in his hair, her thighs parting, her voice low and trembling as she said the one thing he hadn't let himself hope for. "Don't stop this time." Julian leaned over her, their chests brushing, heat growing. "I won't," he promised. "Not tonight. Not ever." Their bodies tangled in rhythm, and rhythm became music. Their hands explored each other like new terrain, but it was always familiar, like they had never stopped, like their skin had been waiting for this return. And when she whispered his name against his throat, he felt it deep where her voice had always lived. In his bones. There are nights that write themselves into memory, nights that don't need words, only breath and skin and the slow rhythm of two people remembering who they used to be. This was that kind of night. Julian lay above her, but it was Sophia who, on the moment, she had unbuttoned the past with her hands, stripped away the distance with her eyes, and now her body moved like a poem he hadn't read in years. but somehow still knew by heart. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her body said everything. Her back arched beneath him, not an invitation, but in answer. Her hands guided him, not with hesitation, but with certainty. Like she knew exactly where he should be, how to shape his body around hers until there was no beginning and no end. Julian buried his face against her neck, breathing her in like salvation. "I missed your voice," he murmured against her skin. Sophia ran her fingers through his hair, slow, tangled, hungry. "Then listen," and he did. He listened to the sound of her gasp when his lips grazed the inside of her thigh, the stutter in her breath when his tongue found the edge of her hip bone, the way her fingers clenched in the sheets as he moved lower, like the memory of his mouth had lived dormant in her nerves, waiting to come alive again. He listened when she moaned into his shoulder, her voice cracking into pleasure. He listened when she whispered his name, not in desperation, but in need. Pure, raw, unfiltered need. Julian wasn't gentle tonight. He was honest. Honest in the way his teeth grazed her skin. Honest in the strength of his grip, in the weight of his body. And Sophia met him with the same truth arched into him, clawed at his back, kissed him with a hunger that dared to say mine without ever saying it aloud. They moved without rhythm, then found it, stopped breathing, then gasped together, paused just to look, to see. Her eyes were wild in the shadows, her lips swollen from kisses, her chest rising in sharp, aching waves. He kissed the hollow of her throat and whispered things he hadn't allowed himself to write. Words like "still," "always," and "you." When she climbed on top of him, her dress pushed halfway off, her hair tumbling down like flames, Julian let his hands fall to her hips and just watched. She guided herself against him, slow and sure, her expression open and unafraid. And then her body spoke again. It spoke in tremors and cries, in the shiver that ran down her spine when he thrust upward, in the shake of her thighs when he held her down and murmured her name like a prayer, in the way she threw her head back and let him see everything: pain, love, surrender. He gripped her tighter, pulled her closer. Their rhythm deepened, turned frantic, then reverent. And in the silence between her gasps, he realized something. He had tried to forget her, but her body remembered him to every inch, every angle, every breathless part of her. When they finally collapsed together, slick with sweat and trembling from the crash of it all, Julian held her tight. Neither of them said a word for a while. Her fingers traced lazy circles across his chest. His arms wrapped around her like, if he let go, she'd vanish into the morning light. She broke the silence first. "You still fit," she whispered against his shoulder. "So, do you," he said, lips pressed to her temple, like no one else ever did. She looked up at him then, eyes tired but soft, and he saw it: truth, regret, the faint trace of hope. "This night," she said, voice barely there. "It's the first time I've felt alive in years." Julian swallowed the lump in his throat. Then, "Stay alive with me." Sophia didn't answer, not with words, but when she kissed him again, slow and aching and filled with the weight of everything they'd been through. He knew her body was still speaking, and this time he was listening. The morning light didn't knock, it broke, and it spilled through the thin curtains, casting golden lines across tangled sheets, bare limbs, and the bruised warmth of a night that should have never happened. Julian woke before her. His body ached in the best way, but his mind was already lying to him, telling him it was okay, that they were okay. That last night wasn't a ghost returning to kiss him breathless, but the beginning of something real. Sophia was asleep on his chest, one leg draped over him, hair a mess of flame and memory. Her breathing was slow, steady, safe. But he knew better. She was never just a woman in his bed. She was the wound and the weapon, the peace and the war. And now that he'd tasted her again, he wasn't sure he could survive losing her twice. His hand drifted over her back, slow, tracing the curve of her spine, as if trying to memorize it all before it was taken from him again. She stirred beneath his touch, nuzzled into him with a sleepy sound that stabbed him with sweetness. "Are you staring at me?" she murmured, eyes still closed. "Maybe," she smiled, lazy and lovely. But when her eyes opened, the morning hit them both. The spell cracked. Sophia sat up slowly, the blanket falling from her shoulders. The marks he left his mouth. His fingers were written across her skin. Her hair was wild, her lips still red. And when she looked at him, there was a hesitation, a flicker of something neither of them had wanted to name. "Regret. You left the door unlocked," she said, trying to lighten it. "I wanted the storm to come in," Julian said. "Instead, you did." She gave him a soft laugh. But it didn't reach her eyes. She stood, wrapped the blanket around herself like armor, and walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up. Rain had passed. The world looked normal again, but nothing between them was. He sat up, watching her, feeling that familiar tightening in his chest, that sense that the moment was slipping away before it even ended. "Say something real," he said. She looked back, surprised. "I just did." "No," Julian said, standing to something true. "Don't pretend this was a mistake if it wasn't." Sophia's jaw clenched. "What do you want me to say? That I missed you every night? That I touched him and thought of you? That I couldn't sleep because your words lived in the back of my head?" He stepped closer. "Yes." She turned fully to face him, still wrapped in the blanket, and for a second, all the defenses dropped. "I wanted to forget you, Julian. God, I tried, but I kept remembering your voice in the dark. The way you said my name when you didn't want me to go. The way you made me feel like I was seen, not owned, not used, not married. Seen." Julian's throat tightened. "So why are we standing here like strangers again?" "Because we don't know what this is," she said. "Because if I stay, I'll fall again. And I don't know if I can survive it this time." Julian reached out and caught her hand. "You're not falling alone." She looked down at their hands, at the scars they both carried. And then almost she softened. Almost. But she pulled her hand back. "We said a lot of things last night," she whispered. "But the morning demands truth. And what's yours?" She stepped toward him, close enough to kiss. But instead, she pressed her hand to his chest where his heart had ached for her for years and whispered, "I still love you." He sucked in a breath. "But I don't trust it," she added. "Not yet." He nodded once, but inside, something Cracked. The morning had almost lied. It had almost let them pretend the world was simple. But truth had a voice, and it always spoke after the fire cooled. Julian watched her dress, watched her pull on her boots and comb her fingers through her hair. And when she reached the door, she looked back one last time. "I'll call," she said. "I'll wait," he replied. She left without kissing him, and he stood in the silence she left behind again. But this time, her voice didn't haunt his bones. It lived there. Days passed, then weeks. Julian didn't hear from her. At first, he told himself it was just space. A moment to breathe. A pause. Not an end. But the silence grew teeth. It gnawed at him every morning, bit into his ribs every night. The bookstore stayed open. The record player stayed broken. The world kept turning, but inside, he felt like he was waiting for a knock that would never come. He reread every article he'd ever written with her in mind. He didn't write a new one, not because he had nothing to say, but because all the words were hers. Every page, every sigh, every space between punctuation. Then, one late evening, the chime over the bookstore door rang again. He didn't look up right away. He couldn't handle another false hope. "Julian." Her voice shattered him. He stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. Sophia stood in the doorway. No umbrella, no coat, just a small suitcase beside her, and a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there the last time she left. She looked tired, but she also looked sure. "I should have come sooner," she said, stepping inside. Julian didn't move, didn't breathe. "I kept trying to find the right moment," she continued, voice shaking. "The perfect line, the right apology. But I realized we never did anything perfectly. We just did it honestly." He walked to her slowly. "I don't want a perfect moment," he said. "I want this one." Sophia's eyes burned. "I was scared," she admitted. "I still am. But I'd rather be scared beside you than safe in silence." Julian reached out and cupped her face. She leaned into him, trembling. "Did you come to stay?" he asked, voice rough. "I came to begin," she whispered. Their lips met like a sigh. Not rushed, not frantic, but full of everything that had waited too long. The kiss was different now, deeper, grounded. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to carry it together. Upstairs, she unpacked her suitcase slowly, placing a book on his shelf. Their shelf. She lit a candle, took off her shoes, made herself small in his arms again, but not temporary this time. They curled into each other like hands in prayer. "Tell me something true," she whispered in the dark. Julian kissed the back of her neck. "I didn't just miss you," he said. "I needed you to breathe." She turned in his arms, her fingertips tracing his jaw. "Then breathe with me now." Their bodies met again, softer than before, not frantic, not desperate, but complete. Every kiss was a vow, every moan a truth. Every stroke of her fingers down his spine was a quiet "I remember you." She rode him slow, her forehead pressed to his, their breath sensing like poetry returning to rhythm. There were no games this time, only need, only love. And when they came together, wrapped in sweat and whispers, it wasn't an end, it was a beginning. Afterward, they stayed tangled in the sheets, her legs over his hands drawing invisible shapes along her thigh. The candlelight flickered against the wall, casting shadows that danced in time with their hearts. "I want to write again," he said, voice hoarse. She smiled. "Then start with me," and he did. The next morning, a new article appeared on his desk, handwritten. No title yet, no edits, just raw, pulsing truth in black ink. It started with 5 words. "She came back to me. The end."